The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Welcome, everyone. We will start the webinar here in just a minute or two. We still have a few people joining, so we'll give everyone just a couple of minutes to get situated. All right, welcome everyone to the webinar, the first webinar of the year. We are excited today to have you all, and you all joined even without knowing what the topic is for today, so that's incredible. Thank you so much for being here. So we're excited to kick off the year. We'll officially introduce the topic here in just a little bit, but first let me introduce Bridget and myself. So Bridget Cogley and I am Joshua Milligan. We are both Tableau Zen Masters and both employees at Technion Data Solutions. We love working at Technion because not only do we get to use Tableau every day, but we get to use it to help our clients. And that is the most fun of all, is to help them see and understand their data and to make key decisions. So we love doing that. If any of you ever have any data needs, anything from data warehousing to predictive analytics, definitely data visualization and visual analytics, we would love to help you, and definitely feel free to reach out to Technion at any time. Technion is a proud partner of all of these different companies that you see below: Warescape, Tableau, Alteryx, DataRobot, and Snowflake. And it's been really cool for me to see those partnerships sort of bloom and blossom over time, to the point that that I've been focused on Tableau, but I'm definitely engaged on projects where we're bringing in Alteryx, or we're using Snowflake to host a data warehouse in the cloud and using Warescape to build it rapidly. DataRobot's a lot of fun as well. So lots of really cool things going on at Technion, and thank you to Technion for hosting these webinars. So when you registered, you were asked, which topic would you like to see, or which topics would you be interested in, not just for this webinar, but throughout the year. So we've gathered that data and have started to analyze it. And it looks something like this. Tableau prep. About 10% of you said that would be an interesting topic, and so we'll definitely be touching on that throughout the year. Dashboards jumped way up there, with about 20% of you indicating that that seeing some information about dashboards, how to build them, design them, that would be exciting. Data storytelling. That's a really fun topic, and I look forward to doing that this year as well. Tips and tricks are always a favorite, and we'll definitely throw in tips and tricks along the way, whatever topic we're dealing with. But we certainly will plan on doing a few webinars this year that are devoted to tips and tricks, things that you may know or may not know, but lots of really cool things out there in using Tableau and Tableau Prep. Just fun tips and tricks. But that leaves one topic which came in as a clear winner, and it's the topic we will tackle today. By the way, there were some other requests as well, so you had a blank to fill in, and we're going to take all of those and kind of evaluate those over time. And we also look forward to any feedback you have along the way. Feel free to suggest other topics that aren't mentioned here, and we'd love to know what would help you the most. So the topic for today, the winner by a large margin or by a small margin, calculations. All right, so 25% of you almost wanted to talk about calculations, which means that 75% of you did not. So I'm watching the attendance now, and how many of you are going to drop? I hope none, because calculations are exciting and really fundamental to how you can leverage Tableau, the full power and capability of Tableau. Calculations really give you a lot of possibility there. So I'm excited to tackle that one today, along with Bridget, who has some really cool things to show as well, and I'm excited to think about it. Here's what we're going to do. We're not going to build out calculations that look like that. Well, we might. Hopefully not quite that bad. No, in fact, what we're going to look at are a few things to do with calculations. First, we'll talk about an overview of just the types of calculations. Tableau has some specific types of calculations, and understanding those types is really key to success with calculations. We'll also talk about some common mistakes and the solutions to those mistakes. We've all made them, and we've all seen those squiggly red lines and the X at the bottom that tells us that the calculation isn't going to work, or maybe it looks like it will work and then it still doesn't work. Well, we'll talk about some of those. Parameters. How do parameters fit in? We'll touch on that. And then we'll kind of wrap it up with where to start and how to learn. So everyone's coming at this from maybe different paradigms, and the way that you learn calculations may be different than the way that I learned them. But the great thing is that there are some great resources out there, and there are some just keys that you can latch on to depending on which paradigm you're coming from. So we'll talk about that as well. And then finally, we'll have some time reserved at the end for questions and answers. You should have a questions panel as part of the go-to meeting, and feel free to pull that up and type it in even along the way. But we'll wait until the end to start to answer them. All right, so I'll kick us off with just thinking about types of calculations. Wow, they all popped up at once. So there they are. There are really 4 types of calculations in Tableau, and we'll kind of go through each one just at an overview level, and then we'll dive into some details. But I find that understanding these types is really key to understanding how calculations work in Tableau and when I might use a certain type versus another type. So we've got row level calculations, we've got aggregate calculations, table calcs, and level of detail. So I'm going to start with the first 3, and in fact I'm going to really focus on those first 2 to begin with, and then Bridget will pick up here in just a little bit as well. So I love Tableau, and we'll be using Tableau most of the time, but Excel actually is a great way to look at how calculations work, and many of you are maybe coming from a paradigm of using Excel, so I find that sometimes thinking about calculations in that way really helps lay the foundation. So I mentioned that that we've got the 4 different types of calculations. The first 2 are the row level and the aggregate. So I'm just going to color code a few things here. So row level versus aggregate, and just think through how some of these calculations might be used in a data set like this. So what I've got is I've got some rental properties and some people renting these. They've got a start date and end date. These look like maybe vacation homes because these are short lengths of time. How much it costs to rent, whether there was a discount or not. So it's a very small and simple data set, but it makes it a little bit easy to talk about the different types of calculations. So at a row level, what we might consider doing is creating some various types of calculations. So a row level calculation is a calculation that's done for each row of data, each record. And one possibility might be something like this. We might say, what was the discounted rent? So I have the rent and I have the discount. But if I want to understand both of those things together, I'm going to need to do a calculation because I don't have that in the data set itself. So at a row level, it might look something like this. We've got rent minus the discount. And when I do that calculation at each row level, I'm going to come up with what the discounted rent was. So in some cases it will be the same as the rent because there was not a discount. But in other cases, that discount actually gives me a new value. So I do get a discounted rent there. So each one of those calculations is done at a row level. Now in Tableau, oftentimes what I'll do is I'll take those row level calculations and then I might want to understand, well, what was my total discounted rent, or for each different rental property itself, I might want to add those up. So I'll be treating those row level values as an aggregation. So I'll color code it there, and you can see I'll have various possibilities for aggregating. Here, a sum will give me the total discounted rent. So that's in Tableau, very similar to what I did here in Excel. I'll probably be adding up row level values or treating them in aggregate, but I did the calculation at a row level. Now we run into some issues potentially if we want to do a calculation like this. So maybe understanding the percent that discount represents. So what percent of the rent is the discount? Well, I might be tempted to do that at the row level. So I might say, well, that's the discount over the rent. And that definitely seems to work at a row level. It's giving me values that I can represent at a percent as a percentage. So 150 is 10% of 1500, and so on. But then in Tableau, if I were to take those row level values, just like I did here, and aggregate them in some way, that's where I may run into some issues, because if I were to sum up that discount percentage, I get a value that's really meaningless. 60%, well, I can do a quick check and I would say, no, the total discount is not 60% of the total rent. In fact, none of the discounts were even close to 60%. So that doesn't work, and it indicates to me that I really don't want to do a row level calculation here. What I want to do instead is an aggregate calculation. And to do that, what I might do is sum up all the discounts, sum up all the rents. So I've got those at an aggregate level. And then do an aggregate calculation where I would take the totals, start with F8, so the discount, the total sum of discount divided by the sum of rent. And that gives me the true percent of discount at a total level. And so that's kind of the difference between the row level and aggregate level calculations. And to see that in Tableau, we'll just take the data itself. So I'll just press Control C, go to Tableau, press Control V. Tableau's going to think about it. What's going on? There it comes, and I get my data in Tableau from Excel. It's created a temporary clipboard data source, but a really nice way of just getting it in here so that we can start to look at it. So in Tableau, I can create calculations. Sometimes I'll call them calculated fields because it's going to create a new field that's going to show up here either under dimensions or measures. And that allows me to start to build out these calculations. So we did discounted rent, and we said that that was the rent minus the discount. So here I've got a nice IntelliSense, and I can either hit Tab or click it. You'll notice Tableau puts brackets around names of other fields. That's optional if it's a single word. If it has a space in it, you really do have to have the brackets. I like it just to keep it consistent, putting brackets around things. But this is all done at a row level. So every row, I'm going to take rent and subtract the discount. And when I click Apply, you'll see that new field here, discounted rent, shows up. And if I check it, I can see that I'm getting what I expect, rent minus discount. Now notice that Tableau is treating all of these as aggregation sums, but I've forced it to be a view where we're looking down to the row level, so we can see that. And if I take my total and bring that out here, it all works just fine. It adds up all the discounts just fine, adds up all the rents just fine. It gives me my discounted rent as a grand total just fine as well. But now, if I were to go and create another calculated field, so in this case, my discount percent, now I might try it the same way that I tried it in Excel at first. Take the rent as a percentage of, or I take the discount as a percentage of the rent, and again, that's all going to be at a row level. Hit Apply, I get this new field, discount percent. Now I know when I bring it out there, it's not going to look right unless I tell Tableau that the default number format for this is a percentage. So now when I bring it out and look at it, at a row level, we're fine. I get the values that I'm expecting, but just like in Excel, because I did it all at a row level and then added it up here at the end for the grand total, it's wrong. And so what I really needed to do in Tableau was not to do this at a row level, but to do it as an aggregation, as an aggregate calculation. I really needed to do the sum of discount divided by the sum of rent. And you'll actually find all of these different aggregations, sums and mins and maxes. If you use this drop down and look at aggregates, you'll get a list of all of the possible aggregate calculations here. And then if you type it out and click on it, or you click on one here, you'll get an explanation and the syntax, and so really nice possibilities there. So now I'm doing the sum of discount divided by the sum of rent, and that should work just fine. I'll hit Apply, and you say it didn't work. I get a bunch of red. Well, the reason is that Tableau originally was treating that as a row level, and so it was doing a sum. That's no longer valid, but if I drag this back out, now it says, oh, you're doing an aggregation, a custom aggregation. Now it works just fine. I get the values correctly, even if I look at it at the lowest level, but no matter what other level I look at it, I get it just fine. So that's row level versus aggregate level. Those are the first two types of calculations, and very, very important to understand the difference between the two. The third type of calculation then is table calc. And let me switch over to another workbook to start to build out some possibilities here. So I'm just going to use the Superstore sample data set that comes with Tableau. This one's a little bit modified, but not a lot. And a table calc, it takes the aggregations of values. So here I've got sum of sales, and maybe I want to look at that over time or something. So I'll take order date and just look at it year by year, and it says, okay, I know the sum. So I've taken row level values. I've then further aggregated them up, and now Tableau says, now you've got one last chance to do some additional logic on these aggregations. And so I can do all kinds of interesting calculations within the table of data that I've created here. So I could do things like a running total. So notice if I do a running total, these $1 million, $2 million values, they start to add up. So 3 million, 6 million, 8 million, almost 9 million. So that's what a table calculation is doing. It is calculating within the table of data that Tableau has gotten and done all of the aggregation on, and now it's applying these table calculations. Table calculations are incredibly powerful, but they do take a little bit of work to understand how it's working, because you have to think through what you're doing within that table of data. So I find it actually easy to build things out as a table. So maybe I've got customer segment, department, and we'll just take the order date and do year and quarter. Let's just keep a couple of years. So one table calculation that's available is something called index, and it's just the function index, and it just gives the index of the row in the table. And this is the way I've kind of learned to figure out a table calculation, because when I look at the index, it is just counting. So starting at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. But if I want to understand how that table calculation is working, now I can start to see that this compute using is how it's deciding to move within the table. So it starts at 1 and it's going table across, so 2, 3, 4, all the way to the end of the table. But I can change that. I can say, well, let's work down the table. Now it counts down the table. And so this is a great way, as you start to get used to table calculations, to start to think about how they're working. A table across and then down, so counting across the table, but then going down to the next row, and so on. And you might start to think, well, why is this so important to understand here within department? So each department increments. Here within, I could say consumer segment. So consumer always is 1, corporate is always 2. Well, this gets important, not so much for index, but if you were going to do something like sales, and you said, what percentage of sales is it? Because you have to think through, well, how am I doing this? So quick table calculation, percent of total. How is it adding up to 100%? Is it across the table? Is it down the table? That's where I have to think through what it's doing. So the default here, it's going across. So all of my values add up to 100% across the table or down the table. Now all of these represent 100%. Or I could even go and say, you know, I want to look at that within a certain customer segment. So within the customer segment, now these values should all add up to 100%. And so all kinds of, as we go down here, actually if I take out department, now you'll see they add up to 100% within that customer segment. So that's how I started with table calculations, starting to understand them and starting to think about how to use them. And then you get to have a lot of fun. You get to do all kinds of really cool things, like say for each month, instead of just looking at sales over time, we might look at something like the running sales over time, so I can start to see how my sales have accumulated over time. Or I might start to say the difference or percent difference. So now I can start to see how did that change over time. So one month I'm down, the next month I'm up, next month I'm down, and I can start to say how is that relative to the previous value, relative to the first value. So I was down from the beginning sales, which is my baseline, but then recent months I'm well above where I started. So all kinds of fun things you can do with table calculations. They're very powerful and definitely important to understand those first three types of calculations. And for the next type, level of detail, I'm going to turn it over to Bridget.
Well, thank you, Joshua. So I'm going to go ahead and swap over. And so level of detail calculations are probably my favorite calculations because what they allow you to do is kind of slice the data in a certain particular way. And so I've got a couple different things I've used in the past to teach them. But if you're familiar with PowerPoint Excel and using pivot tables, then to me, level of detail kind of works like a pivot table. And that's what's taught me to use them the best. And so I am having a couple technical difficulties here, so just stand by. There we go. And so for me, it's kind of when you look at things, we've got kind of, and as Josh was showing us, you've got kind of your basic calculations. But then what a level of detail allows you to do is kind of make what I call the source within a source. And so you can kind of throw in new details. So for example, in this case, I was able to make kind of a region calculation and also at a state level. So it allows me to kind of see what the differences are. The thing about level of detail is you've really got to understand how filters work. So you've got extract filters, data source filters, and then what's called a context filter. So where you would set at the data source the given filter, and then it'll be gray. And that's where, if you change that, it'll affect fixed. And then your normal filters will not necessarily be affected by include or exclude. So that's kind of where I really like level of detail. They kind of just help me see and understand and break things up. And probably the best example I've got is kind of this cohorts analysis. So when we start to look at, okay, I know I've got kind of these customers, and their first purchase, if I want to kind of pull out their first date and say, okay, when did this person start? So when's the first date that this person purchased from me? And so if I'm thinking about this, give me a moment. So I might say, okay, when's the lowest date that this person purchased from me? And so what I'll do is just kind of say, okay, when did this person buy from me? And so I can kind of see it this way, but if I want to do a level of detail calc, what I can then do is say, okay, I want to actually do this by customer. So I can see I've got customer name, I've got the first date that they purchased something from me. And then I'm going to go ahead and do that, but by customer. And so a level of detail calculation allows you to say, okay, at the customer name, give me the minimum order date. And so there's different ways that you can compose these. So for example, this is a fixed calculation. So unless I put a context filter up, this is going to hold regardless. And so, for example, that's what I've done in this dashboard here, is I've made kind of a cohorts analysis. So I can see that the bulk of my purchases really come from the 2011 cohort. And I want to kind of see this year, I've got the least amount of new customers. So if I had kind of a rally cry for this year, it's going to be, I definitely want to improve my sales by customer for kind of New Year. So I need to start getting new customers. That's what level of detail calculations allow you to do. Some of the other things, and Joshua was kind of showing, and I'll kind of jump into some practical examples, is just how you can use calculations to start powering and changing things. And so, for example, one of the most typical analyses that I do is kind of this year over year. And I feel like, it's February, you start getting a lot of these requests of how are we doing from this year compared to last year? And so I've kind of got this year over year calculation that I have used over the years. And so you can see right now, I'm actually pulling in max date. And so if I come over here and click on describe for max date, I can see that this is also a level of detail calculation. And so I'll go ahead and jump to that calculation real fast because I do want to call out something that's neat that you can do with level of detail. And that is that if it's a fixed level of detail calculation and I want it fixed at the source, so I don't want to put any dimensions or anything on it, I can just do the curly brace, put in max date, and then kind of close that out. So that is the exact same as writing fixed with the colon and then max and date. So that's kind of a handy tip to take with you as well, is just to kind of know that for fixed calculations, you can shrink it. So I found that pretty helpful. Jumping back into this year over year, what I've done is I've just said, okay, if the year of this date is equivalent to the year of my current date, well, then that's going to be my current year to date. So I'm looking at, okay, in this example, we're back in 2014. But just knowing that you can set your current year to this year, this is current date. Otherwise, let's see if it's last year. And so that's part of what I'm doing, is I'm actually going through doing a date add. So I'm saying, okay, we'll take this year of the max date and we're going to subtract it 1. So it's a little counterintuitive, but you can use date add to go ahead and subtract a year. And so setting the ranges for that date. So basically saying that within this date up to this period, then that's prior, and then otherwise anything else is just out. It's a really great way to visually see that we haven't come to these months yet. So that's kind of another thing I like to use. Another thing that Joshua demonstrated and that I find to be a very powerful feature is the index. I actually use this a lot for formatting. So if I want things to lay a certain way, so there's not necessarily meaning in the space of where they're located, or I can kind of manipulate them to fall in a given space, I'll oftentimes use index to space them out appropriately. But then also, you'll notice I've got a modulus, so index and then by 2. So every second one, it bounces up and down. And so that's a good way to not just use calculations for analysis, but to also use them for formatting. Probably another one of my favorite calculations is the Steve Wexler diverging bar. So this is a good way if I'm demonstrating things that are in the negative or if I'm doing survey data, I may use this just to highlight kind of where things fall. And he's got a wonderful blog, but what you're doing is by each item, you're setting it to a particular measure. So is it negative or is it positive? And then your zeros are going to be in the middle. And then you're summing all of your negative to get the lowest spot that it's going to fall. And from there, what you do is once you've got that kind of total where it falls, you use this fourth one to see where the prior value was. So you're kind of calling out previous value. This is a table calculation. And I know Joshua's also got another example about this. So you're looking at the prior value and you're adding each record. So it's very important that whatever you're using as your size, because this is a Gantt bar, so whatever you use as your size, you want to make sure that you're looking it up and kind of stacking it on top. So that's kind of that's like a very handy calculation to use. So sometimes calculations are used for analysis, but sometimes they're also used for formatting as well. The final piece is just using calculations to really kind of play and explore and, again, make things line up. So I'm going to go ahead and jump to my population pyramid. And one complaint I often hear, especially when you do population pyramids in Tableau, is that they don't line up if you've got the aggregations as separate measures. And so what I've done is I've made a tidy reference line calculation. And so what this does is it looks up the window max of either male or female and figures out which one is larger. And then whichever one is larger, it returns that. And so then I use that as a reference line. So depending on which one of these is longer, it's going to return that result so that these are of equal size. So that's a really handy formatting trick. And with that, Joshua, I think I'm going to go ahead and turn that back over to you.
All right, perfect. So I'm going to switch back. Oh, and let's see if I can figure out how to share which screen. All right. One thing that I have used calculations for is in the case where you have tables. Now, it doesn't have to be a table, and in fact, I don't always like building out tables, but oftentimes I'll get requests, and sometimes you'll have a dashboard that drills into the detail that looks like this, or maybe the detail is there as the result of an action on a dashboard. So as much as I don't like necessarily having a view like this when there are much better ways to visualize, sometimes it can be very useful to have a view like this. And then Tableau will sort things within this table in a very specific way. So it's sorting now by the row ID just because that happens to be the first field in the view. And I can come in and I can try to sort based on order ID or something, or profit, but I'm not seeing it actually change anything, and I might struggle with thinking about how to sort. Or I might want to give users the option of sorting by the customer or by the item, as well as any one of these others, quantity, profit, or sales. So what I'll often do is I will use a combination of calculation and parameter to allow the user to decide how to sort. So I'll create a parameter that gives me some options. So I might even just call it sort by. I'll use an integer, and the reason I'll do that is just for simplicity within the calculation, because I can give each one of these a value. 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on, but I can choose to display that to the user as something different. So I can say, you can sort by the customer name, you can sort by the item, you can sort by profit, or you can sort by quantity. So I've created this parameter. Now, just a note on parameters. Parameters are a way of defining a single value that's going to be used universally throughout this entire workbook. So no matter which tab I'm on, no matter which dashboard, this sort by parameter, whatever the current value is, that is going to be the value throughout the entire workbook. And then if I use it in a calculation or in a filter, it's going to be that value. So you can see I can set an initial value, so customer name is kind of that initial value here, but then the user can change that value if I show that parameter control. So I can show it in a view or a dashboard, and I can allow them to change it. Now, right now it's not doing anything because I need to hook it up to the view, and often, most of the time, I will do that through a calculation. So I'm going to create a calculated field here that gives me a sort. And what I'm looking for is just a value that that is going to allow Tableau to sort. So I'm going to actually place the resulting field to the far left on this view. And just like Tableau is using row ID right now as the default sort, this new calculation is going to define values that will force a sort order. So I'll do that through a case statement. I could use if statement, but here a case is great because I can just say case sort by, and then for each value I can define what the result is. So when it's 1 was my customer name. Then, and I'm going to bring all of these up to a table calc level using the table calc rank. So rank allows me, here are all my table calculations. There's actually multiple variations on rank, but I'm just going to use just the simple default rank. Rank allows me to specify a field, but a table calculation I do have to keep that at an aggregate level. So I'm just going to take the minimum customer name, and I'm going to rank that customer name, and we'll figure out if it was supposed to be ascending or descending. And I'll put my end on there just to make sure. Yep, see, it didn't like it because I didn't have the brackets. And now it's valid. So I'm going to double check this, and I'm going to double check calculations. Here's a quick tip. You can highlight parts of the calculation, and then you can actually drag and drop those into the view. So if I want to just check what's the minimum customer name, I can drag that in there. Notice that the minimum customer name is going to be the customer name itself because I've got my view all the way down to the row level. So that's going to be the minimum customer name. If I was looking at it at a higher level, like maybe state or something like that, well, it's going to find the minimum customer name for that state. But here it's the minimum customer name for the row, which is the customer name. So that's perfect. Then I can just double check what that rank will be. Just drag and drop there. And it's going to treat that as a continuous value. I don't want it to be continuous. I want it to be discrete just so I can see that header. And yeah, I think I got it right. Ascending is right because that'll make the lower values a lower rank. So that's perfect. So I'm going to take those out, but that's one way that I'll just check different pieces of a calculation as I build it. And now I'm just going to build the other cases. So just some copy and paste, but we'll change it up a little bit. So we had 2, 3, and 4 possibilities. The second possibility was item. We'll also keep that ascending. The third possibility was profit. Here, I don't want it to be min because even in my view, I'm using sum of profit, so I'm summing it up. Now, it really probably doesn't matter at the row level, but I'll just keep it consistent. Sum of profit. And here I'm going to take out the ascending because I do want it to rank the higher the profit, the lower the number. So the most profit is number 1, second most is number 2, and so on. And then finally, the sum of sales is my last possibility. And again, I'll take out the ascending, or I'll just explicitly tell it descending. So that's my case statement. I'll say OK. I'll switch it to discrete just so I can use it at the front of the row here, and I'll place it before row ID. And now notice that it is giving me a value for the parameter selection. So customer name, Aaron comes first alphabetically, so he gets number 1. Well, Aaron Davies gets number 1. Aaron Day gets 5. That's because the rank is counting all of these 4, and then it says, okay, well, the next one's 5, 6, and then the next one's 7. So you can see how that rank function is working, but it is keeping everything in the order that I want. And if I switch to item, it recalculates, and now Now it's getting the items. Now here I've got some characters that come first alphabetically. I might want to think about that. Some numbers that come first, and then finally, if I go down, I would start to see them in alphabetical order as well. So the A's come first, and so on. And then if I look at profit, here it's sorting by profit, and I get my highest profit first, all the way down to the lowest. And quantity. Yeah, my calculation I said sales, so pretend like that said sales. I can edit the parameter and fix that. So we'll just call that sales. So my sort is working, and it's working just the way I want it to. I don't necessarily want the end user to ever see it, so I'll just right-click and uncheck the show header. So it's disappeared, but it's still there, and it's still forcing the sort order based on that selection. Hey, wow, check that out. I had the highest sales. That's why my bank account is so low. All right, so there are all the different possibilities parameterized, and I can use this throughout the workbook, so I could create other views where I'm sorting as well, and it's a way that I can allow the user to select their desired sort order and show that throughout, and then I don't have to keep it as a boring table. I could really start to look at this maybe in another way. So start to look at it as some kind of a heat map here. Oh, look at that! It lost my sort. Put the sort back and hide it. But I can do this with any type of visualization. There's my sales. There's my profit. So that one's nicely. Looks really nice because the visualization matches the sort, so that worked really well. So that's one way that I use calculations oftentimes within a visualization, just to force a sort order or to create a different visualization type. All kinds of possibilities there. We're getting close to time, so I think we'll probably draw this one to a close and open it up for questions. We didn't cover everything that we set out to, which is sometimes the way that it works, and is just fine because we're looking forward to an entire year of these webinars addressing many of the topics that you expressed interest in. We may return to calculations at some point, and if you attended today and you said, well, I wanted calculations, but this is not at all what I meant by calculations, that's fine too. Let us know, because we really do want to help you out in any way that we can. All right, we do have some questions starting to come in, and feel free to jump in there and type in your questions. We can come back. Juan says, excellent presentation. Thank you so much. And then the question is, it's kind of a nested sorting kind of thing. So based on this example, what if I wanted to rank two things at the same time, so by customer and then by sales? So I had here customer, and let's put sales back in there just so we can see it. So there's sales, and I'm going to take, let's go back. There we go. And measure names. All right, let's know what's going on. I wanted sales. Oh, sometimes. All right, come on. There we go. Sales and profit together. So what would happen if I wanted to sort then by the customer name first and then sales? So sales is in kind of a random order here, or actually not random, but just defined then by the second item on the shelf. Well, I can do that by modifying my calculation, or at least one way is by modifying this calculation and saying, okay, customer name is going to be the first rank. It's going to be the rank of first importance. But I do want sales to make a difference too. So possibly what I could do is I could take my customer name and weight that, or at least give it an order of magnitude that is higher than the order of magnitude of my sales. Let's see if this works, I hope. And it did, I think. So let's look at what that did. No, it didn't work. It was so close to working. So customer name. Oh, because 1,000 is not a big enough order of magnitude. So there we go. So given an order of magnitude that's way higher than the possibility for the order of magnitude of the sales. So now Aaron is always a million in terms of his rank, but his sales then get added, and you can see we had some other possibilities for what the rank of his sales were, and now yes, highest sales first and then going down. Same thing with Aaron Day, highest sales and then working the way down. So that's one possibility. I could have created a secondary calculation to kind of insert here, sort of a secondary sort. So that's one thing with calculations just to keep in mind. There's often multitude different ways that you can approach the same problem and come up with a solution. And so don't be afraid to try different things. All right. There are some questions about recording this session, and yes, it is being recorded and will be available. You should get an email when it's ready, but we'll also put the link where it will be posted. We'll put that into the chat as well. Min customer name is counterintuitive. Can I explain why that's necessary? Yeah, so let's kind of undo here and go back to our original calculation. So why min customer name? That's counterintuitive, and it is kind of in a way, because what I'm doing is I have to rank requires, since it's a table calculation, it requires that the value that I'm supplying to it is an aggregate. So here, if I take away min, it says, oh, you can't mix aggregate and non-aggregate. So it doesn't like first of all that I've used min and sums in some places and then not in others. But even if I take that away, then it doesn't like the fact that I'm trying to use a row level value here with rank, which is a table calculation. I have to make it an aggregate. So I chose min. I could have chosen max. I could have chosen, well, some wouldn't work for strings. I can't add up strings. It might have worked for profit or sales. But the reason is that if I looked at just a simple view where I have customer name, and that defines the level of detail for this view, then here it's being used as a dimension. But if I looked at the minimum customer name per customer name, oops, I didn't quite get it. Double click and put the parenthesis in. The minimum name per customer name is the customer name. So it's just my way of cheating and saying, yeah, I know you need an aggregate, but I need it to be the same value. And back on this view, since it is at least at the level of customer name, in fact, it's a little bit lower, then I know that the minimum customer name is going to be the customer name, and it all works really well. But yeah, not necessarily the most intuitive. Yeah, so we've got some comments here that say it's great training, so thank you so much. We love that. And then also a request that could we do more on level of detail calculations? Yeah, we barely scratched the surface, and I'd love to get into that more. And the video will definitely be available. All right. Well, I am not seeing any other questions, and we are almost out of time. So I thank you so much all for attending. Bridget, any last thoughts?
Thank you guys so much. We do also have some additional videos out on the website. I know we've got at least one level of detail video there as well.
Yeah, thank you for that, Bridget. I had forgotten about that. But yes, we did do that, and I'm sure we will again. Thank you so much, everyone. It's a pleasure as always, and definitely let us know if there's any topic, anything that we can do that that would help. Let us know also if we do something that you think is not helpful. We definitely would appreciate that feedback as well. Thank you again, and have a wonderful day.